Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're jumping into something really fascinating, the Divya Astras, these mystical weapons from ancient India, from Hindu mythology.
Right, and what's so striking when you look into the source material is that these weren't just physical things like swords or bows.
Not at all.
No, they were more like, well, manifestations of energy, created by the gods themselves and powered by mantras, by sound.
Exactly. And you couldn't just, find one and use it. The texts are clear that wielding them needed deep spiritual realization.
It was tied to the person's inner state.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
These weren't just tools for fighting. They reflected your spiritual journey. And they could potentially even, bend the laws of nature, according to the stories.
It goes even deeper. Some of the really powerful ones, you could only get them through serious spiritual practice. Tapasya, they call it.
Tapasya.
Yeah.
Hey, that intense discipline.
Years of it sometimes. Plus, you needed purity, self-control, living by Dharma, righteous conduct. It really shows how they saw inner power and outer power as connected.
So that's what we want to explore today. Not just what these amazing weapons did, but what they tell us about how ancient India viewed the cosmos, consciousness, reality itself.
Yeah, get to the heart of what they represented. You have to ask, what does it say about a culture where the ultimate weapons weren't forged in fire, but through, spiritual effort?
That connection is key.
Definitely. That inner-outer link is central to understanding this whole world.
It's a profound point.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's maybe start by looking at some of the big ones, the most famous Astras. We should probably cover the Brahmastra, the Pashupatastra.
Sudarshan Chakra.
Oh, yeah, definitely the Sudarshan Chakra. And the Vajra. Let's start with the Brahmastra, probably the most well-known.
I'd say so. The Brahmastra, the name itself connects it to Lord Brahma, the creator. That tells you something about its scale.
For sure.
The texts describe it as, well, the deadliest weapon imaginable, capable of wiping out almost anything.
And not just immediate destruction, right? It had lasting effects.
Exactly. It could supposedly make entire regions infertile.
Yeah.
No life could grow back. Just utterly devastating. A terrifying concept, really.
Absolutely. And not many people could wield it. The sources mention key figures like Lord Rama
The hero of the Ramayana.
and Arjuna from the Mahabharata.
Yeah.
And significantly, Ashwapata as well.
Oh, Ashwasama. His use of it is a really critical story in the texts.
Tell us about that.
Well, after the Kurukshetra war, filled with rage, he aimed it at Parikshit, who was still unborn, still in his mother Uttara's womb.
Wow.
Yeah. And what's so telling is the reaction. Lord Krishna himself had to step in, shield the unborn child from its power.
So divine intervention was needed.
It really highlights the Brahmastra's sort of uncontrollable potential and how far its destruction could reach. It wasn't something to be used lightly, clearly.
Clearly not. Okay, moving on then. Let's talk about another incredibly powerful one, the Pashupatastra. This one has a very direct link to a specific god, doesn't it?
It does. The Pashupatastra is Lord Shiva's personal weapon. Getting access to it was extremely difficult.
Not just handed out.
No way. The sources stress you needed long periods of that intense spiritual practice, tapasya, and ultimately you needed Lord Shiva's personal okay, his direct approval.
It wasn't just learning a technique then.
Not at all. It was more like a divine gift, a bestowal.
And who actually managed to get this weapon?
The main example in our sources is Arjuna. The story goes he went through intense austerities and even fought a duel with Shiva.
Fought Shiva himself.
Yeah, Shiva was disguised as a hunter. This whole encounter and Shiva then giving him the Pashupatastra, it just shows the incredible dedication needed, both physically and spiritually.
And its power was?
Described as having irreversible destructive power over the entire cosmos. Just think about that scale.
It's mind-boggling, the responsibility that comes with that kind of power. Okay, next up, the Narayanastra. This one seems to work differently.
Yeah, the Narayanastra is interesting. It's a gift from Lord Vishnu, and it has this almost intelligent quality.
How so?
The sources say its power actually grows the more you resist it. Seriously.
Yeah.
So fighting back makes it stronger.
Exactly. The harder the enemy fought, the more powerful the Astra became, which is, incredibly potent if you think about it. Very counterintuitive.
Who used this weapon?
Ashwatthama, again, is the main wielder mentioned.
Okay.
But maybe even more fascinating than its escalating power is how you stop it.
How do you stop it?
Complete surrender. Total. You have to drop all your weapons, offer zero resistance.
Wow. Just stop fighting.
Yeah. It suggests this whole other dimension to warfare in these stories, almost psychological. Power negated by non-engagement.
That's a really powerful image. Okay, let's shift focus a bit. A more maybe visually iconic weapon, the Sudarshan Chakra.
Ah, yes, the Sudarshan Chakra, that divine disc,
Yeah.
forged by Vishwakarma, the god's architect,
Right.
and given to Lord Vishnu. It's a huge symbol of divine justice, of
And
righteousness.
it always hits its mark.
That's the thing. Unfailing accuracy.
Nah.
Never misses.
Yeah.
And it comes right back to the user, like a divine boomerang.
And when we think Sudarshan Chakra, we mainly think of Lord Krishna. Absolutely. The texts have that famous story of Shishupala.
Remind us.
Shishupala kept insulting Krishna, and Krishna had promised to forgive him 100 times. But after the 100th offense...
The chakra came out.
Exactly. Krishna used the Sudarshan Chakra to behead him. A pretty stark example of divine justice for repeated wrongdoing in the narrative.
Definitely makes a statement. Okay, last of the major ones for now. The Vajra. This one has a really unique origin story, doesn't it? Very symbolic.
It really does. The Vajra, Indra's thunderbolt weapon, was made from the bones of the sage Dadichi.
From his bones.
Yes, he willingly sacrificed himself. Vishwakarma then crafted the Vajra from those bones for Indra, the king of the gods.
Why? What was the purpose?
Specifically to defeat a powerful asura, a demon named Vritra, who couldn't be harmed by ordinary weapons.
So the weapon itself is born from sacrifice.
Precisely. It embodies the power that comes from that ultimate selflessness, from righteousness. The very act of sacrifice is like woven into its being, gives it divine authority.
Okay, so those are some of the headline Astras. But there were others too, right? The sources talk about weapons linked to elements.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That connection to the elements is really telling. It shows this ancient understanding of, like, the fundamental forces of nature.
Like what?
Well, you have the Agneyastra. That one commanded fire, could engulf whole armies.
Makes sense. Agni, fire.
Then the Varunastra, linked to Varuna, the god of water. It could cause massive floods on the battlefield.
Yeah.
The Vayavastra could whip up huge storms, tornadoes, Vayu, wind. And the Parvatastra...
Parva means mountain, right?
Exactly. It could apparently make mountains crumble or even fall on enemies. And don't forget the Nagpasha.
The Naga, serpents.
Yep, unleashed hordes of snakes to bind enemies, immobilize them.
It's like a whole arsenal based on nature's power. The texts also mention others, like the Tvashtra Astra, used by celestial craftsmen.
Right. Which makes you wonder, what kind of divine DIY projects needed that kind of power tool?
Huh. Good point. And there were famous bows and things, too.
Definitely. Sharanga, that was Lord Vishnu's bow.
Yeah.
And Pinaka, Lord Shiva's bow, very iconic.
And Vishnu's mace. Kamodaki.
Kamodaki, yes. And Shiva's trident, the Trishul. That one's particularly symbolic.
Why is that?
The sources say its 3 prongs represent time: past, present, and future.
So it's not just a weapon, it's a symbol of time itself.
Exactly. And when you look at all these Astras, the elemental ones, the personal ones, a theme emerges.
So juice.
Mastery. Not just physical power, but mastery over nature, the elements, and also over your inner self.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, the texts sometimes link them to higher chakras, energy centers in the body. It suggests true power back then was seen as this holistic thing: mind, body, spirit, nature, all connected.
So these incredible weapons weren't just, like, lying around. The sources are really clear they had to be earned, right? Through serious spiritual work.
Absolutely a critical point. Getting a Divya Astra wasn't just about being strong or smart in battle. It was deeply tied to spiritual discipline.
How did that work?
Well, the path often involves something called mantra siddhi. Basically mastering specific mantras, those seed sounds, to awaken inner energy.
Okay.
And that was often combined with years, maybe even decades of tapasya, that intense penance and meditation we mentioned, often done in sacred places, deep focus, self-denial.
But not entirely alone. Wasn't guidance important?
Hugely important. Guidance from a realized teacher, a guru, that's called Guru Kripa. You needed someone who'd already mastered the stuff to guide you, transmit the knowledge safely.
Makes sense.
And beyond that, the texts constantly stress purity of heart. These divine weapons just wouldn't work for someone driven by ego, greed, anger.
So your intention, your character was fundamental.
Fundamental. You needed a certain cosmic alignment. You had to reach a level of spiritual evolution to handle that kind of power responsibly. It's a worldview where inner growth comes before wielding great external power.
And the people who got these weapons really fit that mold, didn't they? Like Arjuna, Rama, Bhishma, Dronacharya too.
Exactly. They weren't just warriors. They were also deeply spiritual figures, kind of like warrior yogis.
Warrior yogis. I like that.
Their skill in battle couldn't be separated from their inner discipline. You needed both to handle the Astras.
Right. So to really get a feel for these weapons, let's talk about some of the battles where they were used. The sources have some epic accounts. Arjuna versus Karna, for instance.
Oh, that's a classic duel. The texts describe them throwing everything at each other. Brahmastra, Agneyastra, the Nagastra.
Powerful stuff.
But what's really striking about that fight, especially with Karna and the Brahmastra, is the irony. Because of an old curse, right when he needed it most, he couldn't remember the mantra to fully activate it.
No way. At the critical moment.
Exactly. And then his chariot wheel gets stuck in the mud. It just shows how fate, or maybe karma, plays a role even against the mightiest weapons.
Wow. A reminder that power isn't everything.
Okay.
Another huge one. Rama versus Ravana. The climax of the Ramayana.
Yes. In that final battle, Rama uses the Brahmastra to defeat Ravana.
The ultimate weapon for the final showdown.
Right. But what's interesting there is the emphasis on divine help. The sources mention Shiva's blessings being important and Rama praying before the fight. Again, that spiritual element, even in the heat of battle.
Always there.
Yeah.
And we can't skip Hanuman in Lanka, right? Even captured, he managed something pretty spectacular.
Yeah, Hanuman setting Lanka on fire with his tail while tied up. It just shows his incredible power and devotion.
Definitely.
But relevant to our chat is the mention that he was immune to the Brahmastra.
Immune to the ultimate weapon.
Apparently so. It suggests maybe there were defenses or a hierarchy of power, perhaps linked to spiritual merit or divine protection. Not everything was absolute.
Interesting. Okay, and finally, let's touch on Bhishma. He had a unique ability.
Bhishma, yeah. He had ikamrityu, the power to choose when he died.
Which isn't an Astra exactly, but...
But it shows immense spiritual power, right? Earned over a lifetime. Plus, he was an incredible warrior, trained by Parshurama himself, master of celestial arrows.
It really paints this picture of a world where spirit and combat were just deeply, deeply woven together. True power came from both.
And that naturally leads us to think about, well, how do we view these today? Were they just metaphors, stories? Or could there be something more, like ancient high technology?
It's a pretty wild thought, isn't it? People do speculate. Could the Astras be like early forms of lasers? Guided missiles?
Or even nuclear weapons. Given the descriptions of the Brahmastra's effects mass destruction, making land barren, the parallels are kind of hard to ignore.
And the idea of mantras powering them.
Well, that's where it gets really mind-bending. Some people point to, say, quantum field theory, the idea that consciousness, intention, thought might actually influence particles.
So mantras influencing energy fields.
It's highly speculative, of course, we have to stress that, but it's an intriguing way to look at these old stories through a modern lens. Were they describing something about reality we don't fully grasp?
What about the others? The Sudarshan Chakra, always hitting its target, returning. Sounds almost like a sci-fi drone or something.
Or a self-guided orbital weapon, yeah. The analogy pops up.
And the Narayanastra, getting stronger with resistance, stopped only by surrender.
You could almost maybe draw a line to AI targeting systems that adapt, that learn from opposition. Again, speculative, but...
But it makes you think. And the Brahmastra's environmental fallout? Echoes of nuclear winter concerns.
It definitely gives you a different angle when reading these epics. Maybe there was a knowledge of energy, of consciousness back then that that we're only starting to rediscover.
Which brings us to a big question, but maybe for everyone listening. Can these energies be accessed now? Maybe not as weapons.
Right, not as physical weapons, perhaps, but maybe as inner abilities, spiritual capacities. Siddhis, they're sometimes called.
And the texts seem to hint that the potential is there.
The underlying message often seems to be that these astras symbolize our own inner divine power, our own potential.
So how do we tap into that?
The text suggests it's about aligning with Dharma righteousness, your true path, and using practices like meditation, mantra chanting, focusing the mind.
So the methods haven't entirely changed.
It's interesting, isn't it? The ancient path to pasya, focus, self-discipline, it echoes a lot of modern ideas about personal growth, mental strength, achieving potential.
So maybe we're not aiming to summon firestorms.
Maybe not, but the ability to focus intensely, to cultivate inner calm, to act with integrity, perhaps those are the modern equivalents, the keys to unlocking that inner power.
So as we wrap up this deep dive on Divya Astras, maybe the thought to leave everyone with is this. What if that incredible power described in the myths isn't just myth?
What if it points to a deeper reality about the universe, about our own consciousness?
And what if the way to access that potential isn't out there somewhere, but it's within us, waiting to be found through inner work, discipline, and maybe living with a higher purpose.
It's definitely something worth thinking about. Ancient wisdom, modern potential, maybe they're closer than we think.